What's up, y'all? Nefertiti the Corny Rainbow back with another sew along for you guys, and this time I have my Know Me 2102 fall pattern for 2024. It is a bomber cape jacket. This was one of my first patterns that I actually drafted myself back in 2018. I didn't know that I would be a pattern designer all these years later, but it was one of my favorites, and I kind of like kept it in my little stash of patterns that I wanted to make one day. And here we are. It features only 9 pattern pieces. Don't come for me, y'all, but you're gonna need a lot of fabric to sew this one up. About 5 to 6 yards of fabric, depending on the size that you cut out. In this sew along, I'm using like a khaki, like a stretch khaki fabric, and it's kind of lightweight, but it gets the job done, and it still has that comfort, but it'll keep us warm during these cooler months that we're now getting. You don't have to stick to the suggested fabrics on the pattern, but really have fun with this pattern like all my other patterns. Let's go ahead and get into the sew along. All right, so let's grab our front facing pieces, and you should have already interfaced your facing pieces. We're gonna put this one to the side. All right, grab your armhole facings and also make sure that your notches have been added. Go ahead and grab your upper front. All right, matching your notches, we're gonna go ahead and pin. All right, go ahead and stitch together at 5/8 of an inch. Then we're gonna trim down this seam allowance and then press our armhole facing towards the inside. Okay, so go ahead and baste here and here on your armhole facing and give this a good press. All right, after we have basted down our armhole facing, we're going to turn it over to the right side, and we're going to grab our lower band. With wrong sides together, we're going to go ahead and match our notches here. Baste the sides at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. We're going to go ahead and match our band to our upper front piece. So with the right sides together, and you should still have the notch, we're going to match our notches, and you may need to stretch it just a little bit. Let's head over to the machine and sew this down at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, now we're going to edge stitch this ribbon in place, and I've switched it out to my edge stitch foot. All right, once we've edge stitched, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to the inside, and I'm going to trim down my seam allowance. Before we put our upper front on our front, my suggestion, if you're doing iron-on patches or embroidery, or if you want to do custom embroidery, I would go ahead and do the embroidery at this point. That way you're not getting in the way of the pockets when you do sew the pockets on. If you're putting patches on this upper front piece, go ahead and do so now. You are going to want to make sure to do this to both sides, although I'm just showing you the right side right now. All right, so now we're going to grab our pocket lining, and we're going to match our markings and our notches. Go ahead and head over to the machine and stitch this down right sides together at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I've also gone ahead and I've pressed my pocket seams towards my pocket. We're going to put this to the side, and we're going to work on our front piece. All right, so on your front piece, you should have transferred your placement lines. These 2 markings here are where we're going to place our pocket. So with right sides together, we're going to go ahead and match our markings together and pin. Let's head over to the machine and stitch this down at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so you can see the placement line here, and I'm just going to follow along the placement line. and that should be 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, now go ahead and press your pocket towards your front. Now you're going to grab your upper front piece and we are going to match our pockets together. So with right sides together, we're going to match, and then also with our markings here, we're going to match up our pocket, and then we're going to match our side with our placement line. The marking at the end here is where we're going to match up our ribbing, and your pocket should have notches, so match up your notches in your pocket. First, we're going to place our seam allowance right on the placement line, and then we're going to pin. So just like any other pocket, we're not going to be stitching in between each marking here and here. So we're going to pin, we're going to stitch from this marking to this marking, and then we're going to back stitch, leaving this open for our pocket, and then we're going to stitch at this marking all the way to the end of the placement line here. All right, let's go ahead and head over to the machine. I'm starting from the ribbing and working my way down. Remember to leave that opening. While we're here, we're also going to close our pocket. We're only stitching the pocket seams. So make sure that your seams are going towards your pocket. All right, I've got my pocket pinned, and with all of your seam allowances going towards the pocket, go ahead and start at your marking, back stitch at the beginning and the end. I like a little bit more room in my pocket because my hands are kind of big, so I don't stitch my pockets at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, but be sure to stitch your pockets at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance unless you want a little bit more space like me. Make sure that your seam allowance is going towards your pocket, and we're going to end at the marking right here. Turn your pocket towards the inside, give everything a good press, and we're going to top stitch our upper front. You should start to see the upper front line up with your cape, and we have notches here and also on the shoulder seam, and we're gonna be edge stitching that armhole, and you can choose to do 2 rows of edge stitching or top stitching, or you can just do a single row of edge stitching. I'm gonna do just a single row of edge stitching. So go ahead and pin down your armhole, your shoulder seam, the neckline, and until the edge of the ribbing here. You might need to stretch it just a little bit. Based at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance along our front, our neck edge, and our shoulder, and then we're going to edge stitch along our armhole. Let's head over to the machine. I've changed my foot out to an edge stitch foot. All right, now we're all done with the left side. Let's go ahead and do the same exact thing for our right side. Go ahead and grab your 2 back pieces, and with right sides together, pin them down the center back. You should have 3 notches in the center back. We're going to be stitching at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and if you like, you can also serge your seam allowance. All right, so I've gone ahead and stitched down the center back. I went ahead and serged my seam allowance with right sides together. This is our neck band, our neck edge here, and these are our shoulder seams. We're going to match our 2 front pieces, right sides together at our notches, and stitch the shoulder seams down. So go ahead and grab your 2 front pieces. Right, once you've pinned your front to back, right sides together, we're going to go ahead and stitch at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you are fraying your edges on your sleeve, you're going to stop about an inch away from the edge. If you're hemming your edges like normal and you're not going to do the distressed frayed look, you can just go ahead and stitch all the way down the shoulder seam. Go ahead and head over to the machine, both shoulders at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you've stitched the overarm edges front to back, you want to make sure that you stay stitch your neck edge from back to front on both sides, and then we're going to put this to the side for a second. All right, now we're going to work on our collar. I did make my collar just a little bit longer because I like a more exaggerated collar. You can draft your collar smaller or larger if you like. I like a dramatic collar, so I added about an inch around the edge of my entire collar. You want to make sure to transfer your markings and your notches. You should have 4 notches in total. I'm going to open that up. So with wrong sides together, we're going to go ahead and fold, matching our notches and our markings. And I'm just going to pin. All right, once you've pinned your collar at the edge, what I like to do is just fold it one more time down the middle and then move my pin right to the middle so I know that is the middle. Grab your cape with right sides together. Go ahead and match your notches. And your marking should match with your overarm seam. This is my middle, so I'm going to go ahead and pin there. Okay, you should have 2 small dots on your front edges. Make sure that your collar is meeting right at those small dots. Go ahead and baste down your collar at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you've basted down your collar, now we're going to work on our zipper. So you're going to need a 28-inch separating zipper, and I have a metal, it's about 36-inch separating zipper, and I am going to have to remove a few of the teeth here, the zipper teeth here, and then I'll be replacing the stopper at the end as well. So go ahead, if you're using a longer zipper, and measure out how much you need to remove. Go ahead and cut this. And you can start removing your teeth. I have a little kit that I like to use. to pull the teeth out. You shouldn't have to take out too many, but I like to take out enough where I can have some zipper tape remaining, just like we do here on the zipper. And then I also like to just get a little lighter and get the rest of that fraying at the edge of the zipper as well. You want to keep in mind your seam allowance. So that's where I want that zipper tape to end. So I'm going to go ahead and attach the stopper. All right, so I have some stoppers here, and you may be able to find these at some craft stores, or you can find them on Amazon. And it's much easier than trying to remove them from your zipper tapes. All right, burn the edge here. Now we're gonna turn our zipper face down with your jacket right side out, and we're going to attach this edge of our zipper to our right side. So go ahead and pin. Right now we're pinning the other side of our zipper face down right along that basting stitch that we already created with our seam allowance. All right, let's head over to the machine and baste down our zipper. All right, so I'm starting at the bottom of my zipper here, and we are just basting the zipper down, and I've changed to my zipper foot. Still going to back stitch at the beginning and the end. Just getting over that tough part of your zipper. You might need to hand wind your machine to get you going. All right, and you should have a marking here as well. That's where we're going to be stopping. All right, go ahead and do the other side zipper the same way. So let's check it out. All right, everything is lining up. So now we're going to attach our front facing. So we're going to put this to the side for a second, and we're going to work on our front facing pieces. You should have already interfaced them as well. All right, so we have our front facing pieces and our back facing pieces. Go ahead and pin them together at the notches. All right, so go ahead and stitch your front facing right sides together with your back facing at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I also want you to go ahead and on the outside edge, go ahead and finish off the seam here. So you can serge it, you can do a nice zigzag stitch, but we're going to finish this off. So go ahead and do that and meet me back here. All right, once you have sewn your front to back facing, make sure you press your seams open. You should have markings on your two front facing pieces. So we're going to go ahead and attach this to our cape. All right, you should also have markings on your collar. You do need to also press under 1/4 of an inch on your two front facing pieces. Once you have your facing pinned, right sides together, Let's go ahead and head over to the machine, and we're going to be stitching at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around our neck edge and our front. All right, so I'm going to be stitching over my existing basted stitches, and I switched over to my zipper foot. All right, when you get to the end, you might have to move that zipper out the way. All right, we've gone ahead and sewn our facing. So go ahead and give this a good press towards the inside, and we're going to understitch. Right, so I went ahead and I understitched my facing as far as I could go on my zipper and around my neck edge. I went ahead and tacked down the facing at the shoulder seams and also at the center seams. So I did that by stitching in the ditch right on top, and then I gave everything a good press. I also trimmed down the seam allowance on the inside of the collar. All right, so open out your facing, and your lower edge, we're gonna finish that off with a narrow hem. So go ahead and do that. And then once you finish your narrow hem on both sides, we're gonna turn our facing back towards the inside. So after you've done your narrow hem all the way down, then pin down your facing, and we're going to edge stitch, moving the ribbing out of the way. We're only stitching on this layer of the fabric, not on our ribbing, just to lay that facing down nice and clean on the inside. Once you do that, you can also go ahead and top stitch along your zipper. If you're fraying the edges of your cape, which I'm not going to be doing here, I'm going to be finishing off the edges of my cape. You're going to stitch along the lower edges about one inch from the raw edge, and then you're going to use either tweezers or seam ripper to remove the threads to create that fraying look. All right, so one important instruction that the pattern is missing is sewing your front and back together. So I have pinned here from the pocket, the start of the pocket to the edge of the armhole, and this is the front and back pinned together with wrong sides together, and I'm going to be stitching in the ditch. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're stitching in the ditch, and if you need to, I would baste and then try on your bomber cape and see if you want to make it a little more snug in the back or more loose. But this stitch is going to create that faux sleeve for you. So keep in mind that you're going to be doing that to both sides, okay? So that we're going to be creating the sleeve on the bomber cape. Try it on, see how everything is fitting, and then you're all done.